"You're barren, worthless, get out." Those were the last words Evelyn Mercer heard before her husband threw her into the snow like garbage. After 5 years of humiliation, doctors, and blame, she was discarded, labeled broken by a man who refused to believe the problem might be his own. Now she's on a train heading west, with one suitcase and a lie she'll have to confess to a stranger, the rancher who agreed to marry her sight unseen. But what Evelyn doesn't know yet is that the truth about her body, her worth, and her past is about to shatter everything. Stay with me until the end. Drop a like and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far the story travels. The train smelled like coal dust and desperation. Evelyn sat rigid in the last row, her gloved hands folded tight in her lap, staring at nothing. The other passengers had stopped looking at her hours ago. A woman traveling alone always drew attention at first, but Evelyn had perfected the art of making herself invisible. Shoulders hunched, eyes down, breathe shallow, exist small. It had been 3 days since she left Millbrook. 3 days since Vincent stood in the doorway of the house she'd cleaned in and cooked in for 5 years and told her to leave. Not asked, told. She could still hear his voice, cold and flat, like he was dismissing a servant. "Pack your things. I've made arrangements. You'll be gone by morning." No apology, no regret. Just the clinical efficiency of a man disposing of something that no longer served a purpose. Evelyn had always known it would end this way. She just hadn't expected it to hurt so much. The train lurched, and she gripped the seat to steady herself. Outside the window the landscape had changed. The neat farms and church steeples of the east were long gone, replaced by endless plains that stretched flat and golden under a sky so big it made her feel like an insect. She'd never seen so much space in her life. It should have felt like freedom. It felt like drowning. She pulled the folded letter from her coat pocket, creased now from being opened, and reread 100 times. "Mrs. Mercer, I am in need of a wife. I have 2 children and a ranch that requires a woman's presence. I am not a complicated man. I work hard. I expect honesty, and I do not tolerate waste. If you are willing to travel west and fulfill the responsibilities of a wife and mother, I will provide a home, protection, and respect." The train arrives in Ridgefield on the 18th. "I will meet you at the station. Kayla Boone, respect." Evelyn almost laughed. She'd given up on respect years ago. She would settle for shelter, a place where people didn't know her name or her shame. The train whistle screamed, "Ridgefield, 10 minutes!" Her stomach clenched. She folded the letter carefully, tucked it back into her pocket, and forced herself to breathe. You can do this. You've survived worse. But had she? Surviving Vincent's silent contempt was one thing. Surviving the pity in the doctor's eyes as he delivered his diagnosis was another. But walking off this train and into the life of a man who expected her to be a mother, when she knew the truth about herself, that was something else entirely. I should have told him in the letter, but she hadn't, because if she had, Caleb Boone never would have sent the ticket, and Evelyn had nowhere else to go. The train began to slow. Through the window, she caught her first glimpse of Ridgefield, a scattering of wooden buildings, squatting in the dust like they'd been dropped there by mistake. No church spire, no brick facades, just raw lumber, crooked signs, and a single dirt road cutting through the center of town. It looked like the end of the world. The train shuddered to a halt, brakes squealing. Around her, passengers stood, reaching for bags and children. Evelyn stayed seated, her hands still folded, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack a rib. Move. Get up. You don't have a choice. She stood. Her legs felt like jelly, but she forced herself to walk down the aisle, gripping the seat backs for balance. The conductor nodded as she passed. She didn't nod back. The steps down to the platform were steep, and she had to hold her skirt with one hand and the railing with the other. When her boots hit the ground, a gust of wind slammed into her, hot and gritty, full of dust that stung her eyes. She blinked hard and looked around. The platform was chaos. Men shouting, horses stamping, a dog barking somewhere. A family reunited with tears and laughter. a merchant cursing at a crate that had split open, spilling apples into the dirt. And standing alone at the far end of the platform, arms crossed, hat pulled low, was a man watching her. Evelyn's breath caught. He was tall, taller than Vincent, broader in the shoulders. His shirt was faded blue, sleeves rolled to the elbows, and his boots were scuffed and dusty. He didn't move, didn't wave, just stood there, solid and still like a fence post. She walked toward him, gripping her suitcase with both hands now, her pulse hammering in her ears. When she got close enough to see his face, she stopped. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 30, maybe less. His face was weathered, tanned dark from the sun, with lines around his eyes that came from squinting, not smiling. His jaw was hard, his mouth a straight line. He looked at her the way a man might look at a horse he was considering buying, assessing, measuring, deciding if she'd be worth the trouble. Evelyn wanted to disappear. "Mrs. Mercer?" His voice was low, rough, like gravel underfoot. She nodded, yes. Caleb Boone. He didn't offer his hand, didn't smile, just turned and started walking toward a wagon hitched to two tired-looking horses. Evelyn stood frozen for a moment, then hurried after him, her suitcase banging against her leg. He reached the wagon, tossed a burlap sack into the back, and finally looked at her again. His eyes were dark, brown or maybe grey, she couldn't tell in the harsh light, and completely unreadable. "That all you brought?" He nodded at the suitcase. "Yes." He took it from her without asking, lifted it like it weighed nothing, and set it in the wagon bed. Then he held out a hand. She stared at it. "To help you up," he said flatly. "Oh," she felt her face burn. "Thank you." His hand was rough, calloused, and warm. He pulled her up onto the seat with no effort at all, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. The wagon lurched forward. They rode in silence. Evelyn tried to think of something to say, something normal, something that would make her seem like a reasonable person and not a terrified stranger clinging to the edge of the seat. But her throat was dry, and every sentence she started in her head sounded stupid. Caleb didn't seem bothered by the silence. He kept his eyes on the road, his jaw set, his hands steady on the reins. After what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "The kids don't know you're coming." Evelyn's head snapped toward him. "What? I didn't tell them." His tone was matter-of-fact. Didn't see the point in getting them worked up. "But—" She stopped, unsure what to say. "Won't they be surprised?" "They'll manage." The flatness in his voice sent a chill through her. "How old are they?" she asked carefully. "Sadie's 10, James is 4. "And their mother?" "Dead." The word came out hard and final. Like a door slamming shut, Evelyn swallowed. "I'm sorry." He didn't answer. The silence stretched again, heavier this time. The road, if it could be called that, was little more than 2 ruts carved into the dirt. On either side, the land rolled out in waves of dry grass, broken only by the occasional twisted tree or pile of rocks. It was beautiful in a brutal way, but it felt hostile, empty. "How far is the ranch?" Evelyn asked. "Another hour." She nodded and said nothing else. The sun was starting to sink, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, when the ranch finally came into view. It wasn't what she'd expected. There was no grand house, no white fence, no flower garden. Just a low, weathered cabin with a sagging porch, a barn that looked like it might collapse in a strong wind, and a chicken coop patched with mismatched boards. Beyond that, a few scattered cattle grazed in a pen, and a windmill creaked in the breeze. It looked tired, worn down, like it had been surviving on sheer stubbornness. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the cabin and jumped down. He grabbed her suitcase, carried it to the porch, and set it down without a word. Evelyn climbed down on her own this time, her legs shaky. Before she could say anything, the cabin door banged open. A girl stood in the doorway. She was small for 10, all sharp angles and wild dark hair pulled into a messy braid. Her dress was faded and patched, her sleeves rolled up, and her hands were dusted with flour. She looked at Evelyn with eyes that were far too old for her face. Suspicious, guarded, hard. "Who's that?" the girl asked, not to Evelyn, but to Caleb. "This is Mrs. Mercer," Caleb said. "She's going to be staying with us." The girl's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Because I said so." The answer clearly wasn't good enough, but the girl didn't argue. She just crossed her thin arms over her chest and stared at Evelyn like she was something unpleasant that had wandered onto the property. Evelyn tried to smile. "You must be Sadie." The girl didn't smile back. "Yeah, it's nice to meet you." Sadie didn't respond. She turned on her heel and disappeared back into the cabin, leaving the door open. Evelyn stood there, humiliation burning in her chest. Caleb picked up the suitcase again. "Come on." She followed him inside. The cabin was dim and cramped. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. A rough wooden table sat in the center, and a narrow staircase led up to what she assumed was a loft. The air smelled like smoke and old grease. Dishes were piled in a basin. A pot sat on the stove, something burnt stuck to the bottom. It was a house that had given up trying. Sadie was standing by the stove, stirring something in a pot with jerky, angry movements. A little boy sat at the table, coloring on a scrap of paper with a stub of pencil. He looked up when Evelyn entered, his face smudged with dirt, his eyes wide and blue. "James, this is Mrs. Mercer," Caleb said. The boy stared at her, then looked at his father. "She's going to be helping around here," Caleb added. James didn't say anything. He just went back to his drawing. Caleb set the suitcase down by the stairs. "You'll sleep up in the loft. Sadie and James are in the back room. I'm out in the barn." Evelyn blinked. "The barn?" "For now." He didn't elaborate. "Oh." She felt her face flush again. She didn't know what she'd expected, but it wasn't this. Caleb looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You eat yet?" "No." "Sadie's making stew. It'll be ready soon." "I can help." "No need." He turned and walked back outside, the door shutting behind him with a soft thud. Evelyn stood there, alone in the middle of the cabin, with two children who clearly didn't want her there, and a husband who had just walked away like she was a piece of furniture. "What have I done?" She forced herself to move. She walked to the table, set her hands on the back of a chair, and tried to steady her breathing. Sadie glanced over her shoulder. "You just gonna stand there?" Evelyn flinched. No, I'm sorry. There's bread in the box if you're hungry." The girl's tone was clipped, dismissive. "Thank you." Evelyn found the bread, hard, stale, and broke off a piece. She chewed it slowly, trying not to cry. James looked up at her again, his big eyes curious now. "Are you going to live here?" "Yes," Evelyn said quietly. "Why?" She didn't have an answer for that. Sadie slammed the spoon down on the counter. "Because Pa said so. Now finish your drawing and wash your hands." The boy obeyed immediately, sliding off his chair and padding over to the basin. Evelyn watched him, her chest tight. Sadie dished the stew into bowls with sharp, efficient movements, then set them on the table. "Sit," she told James. He sat. Sadie didn't look at Evelyn. "You can sit too, I guess." Evelyn sat. The stew was thin, mostly potatoes and carrots with a few scraps of meat. It was under-seasoned and overcooked, but Evelyn ate it without complaint. Across from her, James ate in silence, his eyes darting between her and his sister. Sadie didn't eat. She stood by the stove, arms crossed, watching. When Caleb came back in, he washed his hands at the basin, sat down, and ate without a word. The only sound was the scrape of spoons against bowls. Evelyn had never felt so alone in a room full of people. When the meal was over, Sadie collected the bowls and took them to the basin. James yawned and rubbed his eyes. "Bedtime," Sadie said. The boy didn't argue. He slid off his chair and trudged toward the back room. Caleb stood. "I'll be in the barn if you need anything." "Wait!" Evelyn's voice came out sharper than she intended. He stopped, turned. She swallowed. I need to tell you something." His eyes narrowed slightly. "What?" She glanced at Sadie, who was watching from the corner of the room, her face unreadable. "Can we speak privately?" Evelyn asked. Caleb hesitated, then nodded. outside. She followed him onto the porch. The night air was cool now, the sky a deep indigo, scattered with stars. Caleb leaned against the railing, waiting. Evelyn clasped her hands together to stop them from shaking. "I wasn't honest with you in the letter," she said. He didn't react, just watched her. "I should have told you before I came, but Her voice cracked. She took a breath. "I can't have children." The words hung in the air between them. Caleb's expression didn't change. "You're sure?" "Yes. The doctors, they all said the same thing. I'm barren." She hated the word, hated the way it made her feel like a field that had been plowed and abandoned. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "That why your husband sent you away?" Evelyn nodded, her throat tight. He looked out at the dark land, his jaw working. "You could have told me in the letter." "I know, I'm sorry, She stopped. "I had nowhere else to go." He didn't respond. The silence stretched. Evelyn felt the tears coming and fought them back. "If you want me to leave, I'll go. I'll find a way. I don't want you to leave." She stared at him. He turned to face her, his expression still unreadable. "I didn't marry you to give me more children. I married you because the ones I have need a mother." Evelyn's breath hitched. "But can you love them?" he asked. "Can you take care of them? Can you make this place feel like a home again?" She nodded, unable to speak. "Then that's all I need," he said simply. He stepped past her, heading toward the barn. "Caleb," her voice broke. He stopped but didn't turn around. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once, then disappeared into the dark. Evelyn stood on the porch, shaking, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in years, someone had chosen her, knowing the truth, and she had no idea what to do with that. Inside, the cabin was silent. Sadie had disappeared into the back room with James. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers. Evelyn climbed the narrow stairs to the loft. It was small, just enough space for a bed, a trunk, and a single wooden chair. The bed was unmade, the blanket thin and faded. A kerosene lamp sat on the trunk, unlit. She set her suitcase down, sat on the edge of the bed, and finally let herself cry. Not because Caleb had been kind, not because she was relieved, but because she knew the hardest part was still ahead. Caleb might accept her, but his children wouldn't. And this house, this broken, grieving house, was going to fight her every step of the way. Evelyn woke to the sound of something breaking downstairs. She sat up fast, heart pounding, disoriented in the grey pre-dawn light. For a moment she didn't know where she was, then it all came back. The loft, the ranch, the children who didn't want her. Another crash, followed by a muffled curse. She threw off the thin blanket and climbed down the stairs, her bare feet silent on the worn wood. The cabin was cold, the fire dead in the hearth. In the kitchen, Sadie was standing over a shattered plate, her face tight with frustration. "I can help," Evelyn started. "I don't need help." Sadie didn't look up. She crouched down and started picking up the pieces with her bare hands, moving too fast, too rough. "You'll cut yourself," Evelyn said. "I'm fine." "Sadie!" "I said I'm fine." The girl's voice cracked just slightly, and she turned her back to hide her face. Evelyn stood there uselessly, watching this child try to hold together a house that was clearly too much for her. The girl's shoulders were hunched, her movements jerky with exhaustion. There was flour in her hair and a burn mark on her sleeve. She'd been doing this alone for too long. Evelyn took a breath and walked to the cupboard, found another plate and set it on the table. Then she went to the basin, filled it with water from the pitcher, and brought it over to where Sadie was still crouched on the floor. "Let me see your hand," Evelyn said quietly. I know what you said. Let me see it anyway." Sadie hesitated, then held out her palm. There was a thin line of blood across her thumb. Evelyn dipped a rag in the water and cleaned it gently. The cut wasn't deep, but it had to hurt. Sadie didn't make a sound. "There," Evelyn said. "It'll be fine." Sadie pulled her hand back and stood up, putting distance between them. "I need to start breakfast." "I can do that." "No," the word was sharp. "I do breakfast." Evelyn opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She recognized the look in Sadie's eyes, the desperate need to be needed, to prove she was still necessary. She'd seen that same look in the mirror for years. "All right," Evelyn said, "then I'll clean up the plate." Sadie hesitated, then nodded stiffly and turned to the stove. Evelyn swept up the broken pieces and dumped them in the scrap bin. When she turned back, Sadie was already mixing something in a bowl, her movements precise and practiced. Too precise, too practiced. No 10-year-old should move like that, like a woman who'd been running a household for years. The back door opened and James shuffled in, rubbing his eyes. His hair stuck up in every direction and his shirt was on backwards. "Morning," Evelyn said. He looked at her, blinked, then looked away. "Say good morning," Sadie ordered without turning around. "Morning," James mumbled. He climbed onto a chair at the table and put his head down on his arms. Evelyn sat down across from him. "Did you sleep well?" No answer. "James," Sadie warned. "Yeah," he said into his arms. Evelyn tried again. "What's your favorite breakfast?" He lifted his head slightly. "Pancakes." "With syrup?" He nodded. "Me too," Evelyn said. "When I was your age, my mother used to make them on Sundays. She'd put butter on them while they were still hot, so it would melt into all the little holes." James's eyes flickered with something, interest maybe or hunger, but then Sadie slammed a bowl down on the table and the moment broke. "We don't have syrup," Sadie said, "or butter. We have oatmeal." The oatmeal was lumpy and bland. They ate in silence. James pushed his around with his spoon, but didn't complain. When Caleb came in from the barn, his clothes were already dusty and his face was set in that same unreadable expression he'd worn since she met him. He sat, ate, and stood up again in less than 5 minutes. "I'll be working the north fence," he said to no one in particular. "Be back by supper." Then he was gone. Evelyn stared at the door he'd just walked through. No good morning, no question about how she'd slept, no acknowledgement that she existed. Sadie started collecting the bowls. "Let me help," Evelyn said. "I've got it." "Sadie," I said, "I've got it." The girl's jaw was clenched so tight it looked painful. Evelyn stood there useless again while Sadie carried the dishes to the basin. James had disappeared outside and the cabin felt suffocating. She needed to do something, anything. She looked around. The floor was filthy. The windows were so grimy she could barely see through them. The curtains, if they could be called that, were just scraps of faded cloth hanging from bent nails. "I'm going to sweep," Evelyn announced. Sadie didn't respond. Evelyn found a broom in the corner, the bristles half gone, the handle cracked, and started sweeping. The amount of dirt that came up was staggering: dust, straw, tracked in mud, crumbs. She swept it all into a pile by the door and went looking for a dustpan. There wasn't one. She ended up using a piece of broken wood to scoop the dirt into a bucket, then carried it outside and dumped it behind the house. When she came back in, Sadie was scrubbing the dishes with angry, violent movements. "Where do you keep the rags?" Evelyn asked. "Why?" "I want to wash the windows." Sadie turned and looked at her like she'd suggested burning the house down. "The windows are fine. They're covered in dirt. Then leave them. Nobody cares." "I care." Sadie's mouth tightened. "Under the sink, but you're wasting your time." Evelyn found the rags, stiff and stained, and filled a basin with water. She started on the first window, scrubbing hard. The water turned brown almost immediately. She dumped it, refilled the basin, and kept going. It took over an hour to do all 4 windows. By the time she finished, her arms ached and her back was screaming, but the difference was undeniable. Light poured into the cabin now, bright and clean. She stepped back to admire her work and saw Sadie standing in the doorway to the back room, staring at the windows with an expression Evelyn couldn't read. "They look nice," James said from behind his sister. Sadie turned and disappeared into the back room without a word. Evelyn's chest tightened. She'd done something wrong, but she didn't know what. James wandered over to the window and pressed his nose against the glass. "I can see the chickens now." "That's good," Evelyn said quietly. Mama used to wash the windows, he said. Evelyn froze. Sadie stopped doing it after Mama died, he continued, oblivious. She said there was too much other stuff. I'm sure she did her best, Evelyn said carefully. James shrugged. Sadie does everything. He wandered off, leaving Evelyn alone with that observation sitting heavy in her chest. The rest of the day passed in a blur of small, futile tasks. She tried to tidy the shelves. Sadie redid them as soon as her back was turned. She offered to help with the laundry. Sadie said she'd already done it. She suggested making bread. Sadie informed her they were low on flour and it needed to last. By late afternoon, Evelyn was exhausted and frustrated. She stepped outside to get some air and found James sitting on the porch steps, throwing pebbles at a tin can. "Can I sit?" she asked. He shrugged. She sat down beside him, not too close. For a while they both just watched the chickens peck around in the dirt. "Do you go to school?" Evelyn asked. "Used to, not anymore." "Why not?" "Too far. And Sadie needs help here." Evelyn frowned. "How far is too far?" 3 miles. Pa used to take us in the wagon, but now he's too busy." 3 miles, that was nothing. Evelyn had walked farther than that every day back in Millbrook. "Do you miss it?" she asked. James threw another pebble. "Sometimes I like the stories." "What kind of stories?" "The teacher used to read to us about pirates and cowboys and stuff." Evelyn smiled. "I like those stories too." He glanced at her sideways. "You know any?" "A few." He considered this. "Sadie says you're going to leave." The words hit her like a punch. "What?" "She said you'll probably leave, like the last one." Evelyn's mouth went dry. "There was someone before me?" James nodded. "Her name was Miss Hartley. She stayed for 2 weeks, then she left. Sadie says you will too." "James!" Sadie's voice cut across the yard. "Get in here." James jumped up and ran inside. Evelyn sat there, staring at nothing. 2 weeks. The woman before her had lasted 2 weeks, and Sadie was already counting down the days until Evelyn gave up too. That night, supper was worse than breakfast. Caleb came in late, his face drawn with exhaustion. Sadie served some kind of stew that tasted like boiled leather. James fell asleep at the table halfway through. Nobody talked. When it was over, Caleb carried James to bed. Sadie cleaned up in stony silence. Evelyn tried to help and was ignored. She went upstairs to the loft and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. This wasn't working. She'd been here less than 2 days and already she could feel herself becoming invisible. The children didn't want her. Caleb barely acknowledged her, and Sadie saw her as a threat, not help. Evelyn pulled out the small wooden box she'd brought from Millbrook. Inside were the few things she'd managed to keep: her mother's wedding ring, a pressed flower, a photograph of her parents on their wedding day. She stared at the photograph. Her mother looked so young, so hopeful. She died when Evelyn was 12, cancer, quick and brutal. Her father had remarried within a year. Evelyn had never forgiven him for that, for replacing her mother so easily, like she'd been nothing more than a piece of furniture that had worn out. Now here she was trying to do the same thing to someone else's children. No wonder they hated her. She put the photograph away and lay down, still dressed, staring at the ceiling. The next morning started the same way. Sadie broke another dish. Evelyn cleaned it up. Breakfast was silent. Caleb left without a word, but this time Evelyn had a plan. She waited until Sadie was busy with the washing, then went outside to the barn. Caleb was there, repairing a saddle. "Can I talk to you?" she asked. He looked up, surprised. "Something wrong?" "No, She took a breath. "I want to take the children to school." He frowned. "School's 3 miles. I know. James told me I can walk it. It's not a safe road. I'll be careful." He set down the leather strap he'd been working on. "Why?" "Because they should be in school. Because Sadie's been taking care of this house for too long and she needs a break. Because..." She stopped. "Because I need to do something useful." Caleb studied her for a long moment. "Sadie won't like it." "I know. She'll fight you." "I know that too." He picked up the strap again. "All right, But you take the wagon and you bring them back before dark. Evelyn blinked. Really? I don't say things I don't mean. She felt something loosen in her chest. Thank you. He nodded and went back to his work, dismissing her. Evelyn went back to the cabin. Sadie was in the back room, folding laundry with sharp, angry movements. I'm taking you and James to school tomorrow, Evelyn said. Sadie's hands stilled. What? You heard me. School tomorrow morning. We don't go to school anymore. You do now. Sadie turned, her face flushed. I don't need to go to school. I need to be here. The house will still be here when you get back. You don't know how to run it. Then you'll have to teach me. Evelyn kept her voice calm, even though her heart was pounding. But you're going to school. Your father already agreed. Sadie's eyes went wide. He said yes? He did. For a moment, Sadie just stared at her. Then her face crumpled, just for a second, before she turned away and grabbed another sheet to fold. Fine, she said, her voice thick. But if anything goes wrong, it's your fault. Evelyn didn't argue. She just nodded and left the room. That night, she could hear Sadie crying through the thin walls. The next morning, Sadie came downstairs dressed in her cleanest dress, her hair braided so tight it pulled at her scalp. James wore a patched shirt and pants that were too short. They both looked nervous. Evelyn hitched the wagon herself. It took 3 tries, and she nearly got kicked by one of the horses, but she managed. Caleb watched from the barn door, but didn't help. She realized he was testing her. The children climbed into the wagon without a word. Evelyn took the reins and snapped them, and the horses started moving. The road was rough and rutted. The sun beat down on them. James swung his legs over the side of the wagon and hummed to himself. Sadie sat rigid, her hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. They were halfway there when Sadie finally spoke. Miss Hartley used to take us too, she said. Evelyn's hands tightened on the reins. Did she? For a week, then she stopped. Why? Because I told her I didn't need her help. Evelyn glanced over. Sadie's face was hard, but there was something fragile underneath. Did you mean it? Evelyn asked. Sadie didn't answer. Because it seems to me, Evelyn continued carefully, that you've been doing everything alone for a long time, and maybe you're tired. I'm not tired. Sadie, I'm not. Her voice cracked. I can do it. I've been doing it. I don't need... She stopped, swallowed hard. I don't need someone to come in and take over. Evelyn pulled the wagon to a stop. Sadie looked at her, eyes wide and suspicious. I'm not trying to take over, Evelyn said quietly. I'm trying to help. There's a difference. You'll leave, Sadie said. Everyone leaves. I won't. You don't know that. You're right. I don't. Evelyn met her eyes. But I'm here now, and I'm not planning on going anywhere. Sadie's jaw trembled. Then she looked away, blinking hard. Evelyn snapped the reins and the wagon started moving again. They didn't speak for the rest of the ride. The schoolhouse was a small, whitewashed building with a bell on top and a yard full of children running and shouting. When the wagon pulled up, several kids stopped and stared. Is that Sadie Boone? One of them yelled. Sadie climbed down stiffly, her face burning red. James jumped down after her and ran toward a group of boys without looking back. Evelyn watched Sadie walk toward the schoolhouse, her shoulders hunched, like she was expecting someone to throw something at her. A woman appeared in the doorway, mid-30s, graying hair, kind eyes, the teacher. Mrs. Boone, she called. Evelyn froze. Then she realized the woman was talking to her. She climbed down from the wagon and walked over. I'm Evelyn Mercer. I mean Boone. Evelyn Boone. The woman smiled. I'm Miss Coulter. It's good to see Sadie and James back. We've missed them. They've missed this too, I think. Miss Coulter glanced at the children, then back at Evelyn. The last woman who brought them, she didn't stay long. So I've heard. Are you planning to? Evelyn hesitated. Yes. Miss Coulter studied her for a moment, then nodded. Good. Those children need someone who won't give up on them. The words stayed with Evelyn the entire ride back to the ranch. When she got there, the cabin was empty and silent. She stood in the middle of the kitchen looking around. The dishes from breakfast were still in the basin. The floor needed sweeping again. The stove needed cleaning. The laundry needed folding. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. By the time Caleb came in for lunch, the cabin was spotless. He stopped in the doorway and stared. "You didn't have to do all this," he said. "I know." He looked uncomfortable. Sadie's at school." He nodded slowly, then walked to the table and sat down. Evelyn served him the soup she'd made, thin but edible, and a slice of bread. He ate in silence. She sat across from him, unsure what to do with her hands. Finally he spoke. "Miss Hartley lasted 2 weeks. James told me. She was from back east, Boston, I think. Couldn't handle the isolation." "I'm not from Boston." "No." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "But you're not from here either." "I know. This land's not kind to people who aren't built for it." Evelyn met his eyes. "Maybe I'm tougher than I look." He almost smiled. Almost. Then he finished his soup, stood up, and walked back outside. Evelyn sat there alone, her heart pounding. She'd just made a promise she wasn't sure she could keep, but she was going to try. When she picked up the children that afternoon, Sadie climbed into the wagon without a word, but James was grinning. "Miss Coulter read us a story," he said, "about a dragon." "Did you like it?" "Yeah, it was good." Evelyn glanced at Sadie. The girl was staring at her lap, but there was something different about her face, something softer. "Did you have a good day?" Evelyn asked carefully. Sadie shrugged. "It was fine." "Just fine?" "Yeah." But when they got back to the ranch and Sadie climbed down from the wagon, she looked at Evelyn for just a second. "Thanks," she said quietly. Then she turned and walked into the cabin before Evelyn could respond. Evelyn sat there, reins in hand, her throat tight. It wasn't much, but it was something. That night at supper, Caleb asked James about school. The boy talked non-stop about the dragon story and the spelling test and the frog he'd found in the yard. Sadie stayed quiet, but she didn't snap at anyone. When the meal was over, she let Evelyn help with the dishes. They worked side by side in silence, passing plates and bowls without speaking. When they finished, Sadie dried her hands on her apron and looked at Evelyn. "The bread box is almost empty," she said. "We need to bake tomorrow." "All right," Evelyn said. "Will you show me how you do it?" Sadie hesitated. "You don't know how to bake bread?" "I know how, but I want to learn your way." The girl's face softened just slightly. "Okay." She turned and went to the back room. Evelyn stood there, hands still damp, staring at the closed door. It was the first time Sadie had offered to teach her anything. The first time she'd been treated like someone who might actually stay. Evelyn climbed the stairs to the loft and sat on the bed, her chest aching with something that felt dangerously close to hope. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows she'd cleaned. The ranch was still hard. The children were still grieving. Caleb was still distant. But for the first time since she'd arrived, Evelyn didn't feel like she was drowning. She felt like she might actually have a chance. The bread didn't rise. Evelyn stared at the flat, dense loaf, sitting on the counter, and wanted to scream. She'd followed Sadie's instructions exactly. Measured the flour, kneaded the dough until her arms ached, let it sit by the warm stove for an hour. But something had gone wrong. The yeast maybe, or the temperature, or her own incompetence. Sadie came in from feeding the chickens, took one look at the bread and sighed. "You didn't punch it down," she said. "You didn't tell me to punch it down. I thought everyone knew that." "Well, I didn't." Sadie grabbed the loaf and knocked it against the counter. It made a sound like a brick hitting wood. "We can use it for the pigs, I guess." Evelyn's face burned. "I'm sorry." "It's fine." But Sadie's tone said it wasn't fine. It said Evelyn had wasted flour they couldn't afford to waste and time they didn't have. "I'll do better next time," Evelyn said. "Yeah." Sadie turned away. "Maybe." The word stung worse than an outright insult. It had been 3 weeks since Evelyn arrived at the ranch, and the fragile peace she'd started building with Sadie felt like it was crumbling. Some days were good. Sadie would let her help with the washing or show her how to mend a torn shirt. Other days, Sadie barely spoke to her, retreating into that hard shell of self-sufficiency that made Evelyn feel like an intruder. James was easier. He had started sitting next to her at meals, asking questions about the stories she remembered from her own childhood. Last week he'd fallen asleep with his head on her shoulder during the wagon ride home from school. It had made her chest ache in a way that was both painful and sweet. But Caleb was a mystery she couldn't solve. He worked from before sunrise until after dark, 6 days a week. On Sundays, he fixed things around the ranch, the fence, the roof, the porch steps that had been sagging for months. He spoke to her only when necessary, usually in brief, practical sentences. Need anything from town? Fences fixed. Supper's good. He still slept in the barn. Evelyn had started to wonder if he regretted bringing her here, if he looked at her the way Vincent had towards the end, like a problem he didn't know how to fix. She was pulling weeds in the pitiful vegetable garden behind the cabin when she heard the wagon coming up the road. She straightened, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. It wasn't Caleb's wagon. A woman was driving, older, maybe 60, with steel grey hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a black dress that looked expensive even from a distance. Beside her sat a younger woman, blonde and pretty, with a pinched mouth. They pulled up to the house and climbed down without waiting for an invitation. "You must be the new wife," the older woman said. It wasn't a question. Evelyn wiped her dirty hands on her apron. "Yes, I'm Evelyn Boone. Margaret Hastings. This is my daughter Clara." The woman's eyes swept over Evelyn, taking in the dirt on her dress, the sweat on her forehead, the wild state of her hair. "We're from the church committee in town. We like to visit new families." "That's kind of you." Evelyn tried to smile. "Would you like to come inside?" "No need. We won't stay long." Margaret folded her hands at her waist. "We just wanted to see how you were settling in, make sure everything was appropriate." The way she said appropriate made Evelyn's skin crawl. "Everything's fine," Evelyn said carefully. "Is it?" Clara spoke up for the first time, her voice sweet but cold. "Because we heard you're from back east, that you answered an advertisement." "That's right." "How modern." Margaret's smile didn't reach her eyes. "In my day, marriages were arranged through proper channels. Family introductions, references." "Times change," Evelyn said. "Indeed they do." Margaret glanced at the cabin, at the patched roof, and the crooked chimney. Poor Caleb. He's had such a difficult time since Sarah passed. Such a tragedy. I'm sure it was. She was a wonderful woman, beautiful, such a graceful figure, and she ran this household like a dream. Margaret shook her head. "It's a shame the children have to grow up without her." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "They still have a mother." "Do they?" Clara's eyebrows lifted. "I heard the little girl does all the cooking and cleaning. That doesn't sound like a mother's touch to me." Before Evelyn could respond, the cabin door banged open, and Sadie came out, wiping her hands on a towel. She stopped when she saw the visitors, her face going carefully blank. "Hello, Sadie dear," Margaret cooed. "How are you managing?" "Fine, Mrs. Hastings." "Still doing all the housework yourself, I imagine?" Sadie's eyes flicked to Evelyn, then away. "I don't mind." "Of course you don't. You're such a capable girl." Margaret reached out and patted Sadie's cheek like she was a pet. "Just like your mother. She would be so proud." Evelyn watched Sadie's face crumple slightly before she caught herself. "We should let you get back to your work," Margaret said, turning back to Evelyn. "We'll be in town if you need anything, advice, guidance, prayer." Her smile was razor sharp. "I'm sure you'll need it." They climbed back into their wagon and drove off, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Evelyn stood there, her hands shaking with rage. "They come by a lot," Sadie said quietly. "Do they?" Mrs. Hastings was Mama's friend. She liked to visit. Sadie twisted the towel in her hands. "She brings us things sometimes. Food, fabric, stuff we need." "That's generous of her." "Yeah." Sadie looked at the ground. "She says Mama would want her to look after us." Evelyn heard what Sadie wasn't saying, that Margaret thought she was doing a better job than Evelyn ever could. "Go finish your homework," Evelyn said. "I'll start supper." Sadie hesitated, then nodded and went back inside. Evelyn stayed in the garden, pulling weeds with violent, angry movements. Every word Margaret had said echoed in her head. Beautiful, graceful, wonderful, everything Evelyn wasn't and never would be. She'd spent her whole life being compared to other women and found wanting. In Millbrook, Vincent's mother had made it clear that Evelyn wasn't refined enough, wasn't charming enough, wasn't the daughter-in-law she'd hoped for. Now here she was, hundreds of miles away, and nothing had changed. She was still the consolation prize, the second choice, the woman who'd never measure up. That night at supper, Caleb noticed something was wrong. "You all right?" he asked. Evelyn looked up, surprised he'd spoken. "Fine. You look upset." "I'm not." He studied her for a moment, then went back to his food. But when the meal was over and the children had gone to bed, he found her outside on the porch, staring at the dark fields. "What happened today?" he asked. Evelyn debated lying, then decided against it. "Margaret Hastings came by, with her daughter." Caleb's jaw tightened. What did she want? To make sure everything was appropriate. Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself. "She told me about your wife, about how wonderful she was. Margaret's a busybody." "She's probably right, though," Caleb frowned. "About what?" "About Sarah, about how much better she was at all of this than I am. That's not—" "I can't even bake bread, Caleb," her voice cracked. "Sadie's 10 years old, and she's better at running this house than I am. James barely talks to me, and you—" She stopped. "What about me?" "You sleep in the barn." The words hung between them. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "That's not about you." "Isn't it?" "No." He leaned against the porch railing, his face shadowed. "When Sarah died, I told myself I wouldn't let anyone get that close again, that it was safer to keep distance. So you brought me here just to keep me at arm's length. I brought you here because my kids needed someone." His voice was rough. "But I didn't think about what that would mean for you, for them." He looked at her. "I'm not good at this." "At what?" "Being a husband." Evelyn almost laughed. "You think I'm good at being a wife? I failed at it so completely my first husband threw me away like trash. He was an idiot." The bluntness of it startled her. "What?" "Your husband. He was an idiot." Caleb's eyes were hard. "Any man who'd blame a woman for something that wasn't her fault is a fool. And any man who'd throw away someone who works as hard as you do doesn't deserve you." Evelyn stared at him. In 3 weeks, it was the most he'd said to her at one time. "I don't work hard enough," she said. "Not compared to—" "Compared to who? Sarah?" He shook his head. "Sarah grew up on a ranch. She knew how to do all this because she'd been doing it since she was 8 years old. You're learning. That's different. Sadie doesn't think so. Sadie's scared." "Of what?" "Of losing someone else." Caleb's voice was quiet. "She lost her mother. Then Miss Hartley came and left. Now you're here, and she's waiting for you to leave too." "I'm not going to leave her. I know that. You know that. But Sadie doesn't." He straightened up. "Give her time." "What if time isn't enough?" "It will be." He started to walk away, then stopped. "And for what it's worth, I don't sleep in the barn because of you. I sleep there because I'm a coward." He disappeared into the darkness before she could respond. Evelyn stood on the porch for a long time, her mind spinning. The next morning, she woke up with a plan. When Caleb came in for breakfast, she was already up, dressed, and making oatmeal. Sadie appeared a few minutes later, looking surprised. "I've got it," Evelyn said, before the girl could object. "Sit down." Sadie sat wary. They ate in the usual silence. But when Caleb stood to leave, Evelyn spoke up. "I need to go into town today." He paused. "What for?" "Supplies, fabric, a few other things." "Make a list. I'll pick them up on Saturday." "I'd like to go myself." He frowned. "It's a long ride." "I can handle it." He looked like he wanted to argue, then shrugged. "Suit yourself. Take the wagon." After he left, Sadie stared at her. "Why do you need fabric?" "I'm going to make new curtains. The old ones are fine." "The old ones are rags." Evelyn started clearing the table. "And I'm going to fix your dress while I'm at it, the one with the torn hem. I can fix it myself." "I know you can, but you shouldn't have to." She looked at Sadie. You want to come with me? Sadie blinked. To town? Yes. What about James? He can come too. We'll go after school. For a moment, Sadie looked like she might argue. Then something shifted in her face. Okay. That afternoon, the three of them rode into Ridgefield together. James bounced in the back of the wagon, pointing out every bird and cloud. Sadie sat beside Evelyn, quiet but alert. The general store was small and cramped, smelling of leather and tobacco. The clerk, a thin man with suspicious eyes, watched them as they browsed. Evelyn picked out fabric for curtains, thread, needles. She found a hair ribbon for Sadie, blue and pretty, a bag of peppermint sticks for James. At the counter, she hesitated, then added a small tin of tea, real tea, not the bitter chicory blend they'd been drinking. The total made her wince, but she paid without complaint. As they were leaving, a woman's voice called out, "Why, it's little Sadie Boone!" Evelyn turned. Margaret Hastings was standing outside the milliner's shop, Clara beside her. "Hello, Mrs. Hastings," Sadie said, her voice flat. "Out shopping, I see." Margaret's eyes swept over Evelyn's purchases. "How lovely! New curtains, how ambitious." "The old ones needed replacing," Evelyn said. "Did they? Sarah made those herself, you know, beautiful stitching." Margaret smiled. "But I suppose they were getting worn." "They were falling apart," Evelyn said evenly. "Well, we all have different standards." Margaret's gaze landed on the ribbon in Sadie's hand. What a pretty color. Blue was always Sarah's favorite. Sadie's face went pale. Evelyn felt something snap inside her. "Mrs. Hastings," she said, her voice calm and cold, "I appreciate your concern for this family, but we're managing just fine." "Are you?" Margaret's eyebrows lifted. "Because from what I hear, what you hear doesn't concern me. What concerns me is that my daughter looks uncomfortable and I'd like to take her home now." The word daughter landed like a stone. Margaret's smile froze. Clara's mouth fell open. Sadie stared at Evelyn, her eyes wide. "Good day," Evelyn said. She took Sadie's hand and walked away, James trailing behind them. They didn't speak until they were in the wagon, halfway out of town. Then Sadie said quietly, "You called me your daughter." Evelyn's hands tightened on the reins. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have—" "No," Sadie's voice was thick. "It was good, it felt good." Evelyn glanced over. Sadie was staring straight ahead, her jaw trembling. "Mrs. Hastings makes me feel bad," Sadie said, "like I'm not doing enough, like I'm failing Mama." "You're not failing anyone. She says Mama would want things done a certain way. Your Mama's not here." Evelyn's voice was gentle but firm. "And I don't think she'd want you to spend your whole life trying to be her." Sadie was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Do you really think the curtains need replacing?" "I do." "Okay." Sadie took a shaky breath. "Then let's replace them." When they got home, Caleb was in the barn, shoeing one of the horses. He looked up when they came in, his eyes landing on the packages in Evelyn's arms. "Get what you needed?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded, then went back to work. That evening, Evelyn spread the fabric out on the table and started cutting. Sadie watched for a while, then sat down and picked up a needle. "Show me how you're doing the hem," she said. Evelyn showed her. They worked side by side in silence, the only sound the snip of scissors and the crackle of the fire. James colored at the other end of the table, humming to himself. When Caleb came in for supper, he stopped in the doorway. "Smells good," he said. Evelyn looked up. "It's just stew." "Still smells good." He sat down, and for the first time since she'd arrived, the silence at the table didn't feel suffocating. It felt almost comfortable. After the meal, Evelyn hung the first of the new curtains over the kitchen window. They were simple, white cotton with a small blue pattern, but they transformed the room, made it feel lighter, cleaner. Sadie stood back and stared at them. "They're nice." "You think so?" "Yeah." She paused. "Mama would have liked them." It was the first time Sadie had mentioned her mother without anger or grief weighing down every word. Evelyn felt something loosen in her chest. That night she was cleaning up the last of the dishes when Caleb appeared in the doorway. I'm moving back into the house, he said abruptly. Evelyn froze. What? Tonight, I'll sleep down here. You can keep the loft. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. He looked uncomfortable. But I should have done it weeks ago. You're my wife. You shouldn't be sleeping alone while I hide in the barn like a coward. Evelyn's throat tightened. Caleb, I'm not promising anything, he said quickly. I'm not good at closeness, but I can try. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. He grabbed a blanket from the cupboard and spread it on the floor near the hearth. It looked deeply uncomfortable. There's a spare mattress in the loft, Evelyn said. I can bring it down. I've got it. But when he climbed the stairs and returned with the thin, lumpy mattress, Evelyn helped him wrestle it into place. They worked together in awkward silence, bumping elbows and apologizing. When it was done, Caleb stepped back and looked at his makeshift bed. It's not much, he said. It's better than the barn. He almost smiled. Yeah. Evelyn climbed the stairs to the loft, her heart pounding. She could hear Caleb moving around below, settling in. The floorboards creaked under his weight. She heard him sigh, heard the rustle of the blanket. She lay down and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in her life, she was sleeping under the same roof as a man who'd chosen her, knowing the truth about her. A man who defended her. A man who was trying, however clumsily, to be a husband. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something. The next few days passed in a strange, tentative peace. Caleb started eating breakfast with them instead of rushing out to the barn. He fixed the wobbly table leg. He asked Evelyn if she needed anything from town. Sadie stopped redoing every chore Evelyn touched. She still did most of the work. That was a habit too ingrained to break overnight. But she let Evelyn help. She taught her how to make biscuits, how to kill and pluck a chicken, how to darn socks so the stitches didn't show. James started climbing into Evelyn's lap during story time, his small body warm and trusting against hers. And every night Caleb slept on his mattress by the hearth. He never tried to come upstairs, never suggested anything beyond what they already had. But he was there, solid and steady, and that mattered. Then one morning, Evelyn woke up feeling wrong. Her stomach was churning, her head ached. She stumbled down the stairs and barely made it outside before she vomited into the dirt. Sadie found her there, pale and shaking. Are you sick? The girl asked, her voice scared. I don't know. Evelyn wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Maybe something I ate. But deep down she knew. She'd been tired lately, emotional, her breasts were tender, and she was late. 2 weeks late, maybe more. She hadn't thought much of it because she'd always been irregular. But now, kneeling in the dirt with her stomach heaving, she couldn't deny it any more. She was pregnant. The realization hit her like a physical blow. It was impossible. The doctors had told her it was impossible, but here she was, sick as a dog at dawn, and there was no other explanation. She staggered to her feet, her mind racing. She couldn't tell Caleb. Not yet. Not until she was sure. And even then, how could she? He'd married her believing she was barren. He'd accepted her despite it. Now she was supposed to tell him the doctors had been wrong. Or worse, what if they hadn't been wrong? What if this was some cruel trick, some fluke that would end in blood and heartbreak? She'd heard stories. Women who got pregnant against all odds only to lose the baby a few weeks later. What if that happened to her? She couldn't bear it, couldn't bear to hope, only to have it ripped away. So she said nothing. She forced herself to eat breakfast, though it turned her stomach. She drove the children to school, gripping the reins with white knuckles. She scrubbed the floor until her hands were raw, and every night she lay in the loft and pressed her hands to her belly, terrified and hopeful in equal measure. 2 weeks passed. The nausea got worse. She started hiding it, stepping outside to vomit, claiming she had a headache, eating less at meals, so no one would notice if she couldn't keep it down. But Sadie noticed anyway. One morning, she found Evelyn leaning against the side of the cabin, breathing hard. You're sick, Sadie said. It wasn't a question. I'm fine. You're not. The girl's face was pale. You need a doctor. I don't. You're sick like Mama was. Sadie's voice broke. Before she died, she kept saying she was fine, but she wasn't. And then, Sadie, I'm not dying. You don't know that. Evelyn caught the girl's shoulders. Listen to me. I'm not dying. I promise you. Then what's wrong? Evelyn opened her mouth, closed it. She couldn't lie to this child, not after everything. I think I might be pregnant, she said quietly. Sadie's eyes went huge. But you said, I know what I said. I was wrong. For a moment, Sadie just stared at her. Then her face crumpled. You're going to die. Mama died having a baby. You're going to die too. I'm not. But Sadie tore away and ran into the house, slamming the door behind her. Evelyn stood there, her heart breaking. She hadn't thought about that, hadn't considered that for Sadie, pregnancy meant death. She went inside. Sadie was in the back room, crying into her pillow. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed. Sadie, go away. I'm not going to die. You don't know that, Sadie's voice was muffled. Nobody knows that. Mama didn't know either. You're right, I don't know. Evelyn put a hand on the girl's back. But I'm going to fight like hell to make sure I don't. Sadie turned over, her face blotchy and wet. Promise? I promise. Does Pa know? Not yet. You have to tell him. I will, when I'm ready. Sadie sat up and wiped her face. He's going to be scared too. I know. The girl looked at her for a long moment. Then she threw her arms around Evelyn's neck and held on tight. Evelyn held her back, her own tears finally spilling over. I don't want you to die, Sadie whispered. I don't want to die either, Evelyn whispered back. They sat there for a long time, two people clinging to each other in a house that had seen too much loss already. And outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the first cold bite of an early winter. That night, Evelyn finally told Caleb. She waited until the children were asleep, until the cabin was quiet except for the crackle of the dying fire. Caleb was sitting at the table, going over some paperwork by lamplight, his face tired and lined. I need to talk to you, she said. He looked up. Something in her voice made him set down his pencil. What's wrong? She sat down across from him, her hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white. I'm pregnant. The words fell into the silence like stones into deep water. Caleb stared at her. What? I'm pregnant, about 2 months, I think. His face went through a series of expressions. Shock, confusion, something that might have been fear. But you said, I know what I said. The doctors told me I couldn't. They were wrong. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. Are you sure? Yes. Have you seen a doctor? Not yet, but I know. He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. Sarah died giving birth to James. I know. It was... He stopped, his jaw working. She bled. There was so much blood, the midwife couldn't stop it. I watched her die on that bed upstairs, and there was nothing I could do. Evelyn's throat tightened. I'm not, Sarah. I know you're not. His eyes met hers, and she saw the terror in them. But I can't go through that again. You won't have to. You don't know that. No, she admitted. I don't, but I'm going to fight. I'm not going to leave you or the children. He looked away, his hands fisted on the table. When Sarah got pregnant with James, I was terrified. She'd almost died with Sadie. The doctor said another baby could kill her, but she wanted him so badly. His voice cracked, and I couldn't say no. I couldn't tell her no. This is different. I'm healthy, strong. Sarah was healthy too, until she wasn't. Evelyn reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. He flinched but didn't pull away. I'm scared too, she said quietly. I'm terrified. But this baby is coming whether we're ready or not, so we can either spend the next 7 months drowning in fear, or we can fight for this. He looked at her hand on his, then turned his palm up and gripped her fingers. His hand was rough and warm and shaking slightly. I can't lose you, he said. It was the closest he'd come to saying he cared. You won't, she promised. But even as she said it, she wondered if it was a promise she could keep. The next morning, Caleb rode into town before dawn and came back with the doctor. Dr. Brennan was a gruff, no-nonsense man in his 50s with grey whiskers and tired eyes. He examined Evelyn in the loft, while Sadie paced downstairs, and Caleb stood outside, smoking a cigarette with shaking hands. When the examination was over, Dr. Brennan climbed down and found Caleb on the porch. "She's pregnant, about 10 weeks. Caleb's face went white. "Is she? Will she?" "She's healthy, strong build, no signs of complications." The doctor pulled out his pipe. "But you need to understand something. Childbirth is dangerous, always has been, always will be. I can't promise you she'll survive it." Caleb looked like he might be sick. "That said," Dr. Brennan continued, "she's not your wife. Different body, different risks. Sarah had a weak heart, did you know that?" Caleb shook his head numbly. "She did. I suspected it after Sadie's birth, confirmed it after. I told her another pregnancy was dangerous, but..." He shrugged. "Some women want babies more than they want their own lives." "She never told me," Caleb said hoarsely. "No, she wouldn't have." The doctor lit his pipe. "My point is, Evelyn's not carrying the same risks. She's got a better chance. Not a guarantee, but better." "What do I do?" "Keep her fed, keep her rested. Don't let her work herself to death." He paused. "And when the time comes, send for me early. I'd rather sit around for 12 hours than show up too late." After he left, Caleb came upstairs. Evelyn was sitting on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap. "He told you?" she asked. "Yeah, I'm sorry." He sat down beside her, not touching, just close. "Don't be sorry, this isn't your fault." "It isn't yours either." He didn't answer. They sat in silence for a while, then Caleb said, "I'm going to build a bigger bed down here, so we can... He stopped, his face flushing. "So I can be close in case you need something." Evelyn's chest tightened. "Okay. And I'm hiring help, someone to do the heavy work. We can't afford I'll find the money." His voice was firm. "You're not lifting water buckets or scrubbing floors or any of that. Not anymore." "Caleb, I'm not made of glass." "I know, but I'm not taking chances." He looked at her, his expression raw. "I can't." She nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Over the next few weeks, the ranch transformed. Caleb hired a teenage boy from town, a quiet, gangly kid named Peter, to help with the heavy chores. He built a new bed frame and mattress, wide enough for two, and set it up in the corner of the main room. He hung a curtain around it for privacy, and every night he slept beside her, not touching, not close, but there. Evelyn would lie awake listening to him breathe, feeling the warmth of another body in the darkness. Sometimes she'd hear him shift, restless, and she'd know he was awake too, staring at the ceiling and worrying. But he never said anything, just lay there, a silent guardian against the fear they both carried. Sadie, meanwhile, had become fiercely protective. She watched Evelyn like a hawk, scolding her if she tried to lift anything heavy, bringing her water without being asked, making sure she ate even when the nausea was bad. "You need to rest," Sadie would say, sounding like a miniature version of Dr. Brennan. "I'm fine." "You're not fine, you're growing a person, that's hard work." It was surreal, being mothered by a 10-year-old. James didn't fully understand what was happening, but he seemed to sense the shift in the household. He started bringing Evelyn things, rocks, feathers, wildflowers, and leaving them on the table like offerings. "For the baby," he'd say solemnly. It made her want to cry every time. By November, Evelyn was showing. Not much, just a small, firm swell under her dress, but enough that the town noticed. Margaret Hastings noticed. She showed up on a cold afternoon when Caleb was out checking the cattle and the children were at school. Evelyn was hanging laundry on the line, moving slowly, her back aching. "My dear," Margaret called from her wagon, "you shouldn't be doing that in your condition." Evelyn turned. "I'm fine, Mrs. Hastings." Margaret climbed down, her face arranged in an expression of exaggerated concern. "But surely you should be resting, especially given..." Well, she lowered her voice. "Given what happened to poor Sarah." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "I'm not Sarah." Of course not. Margaret's eyes swept over her. But still, one does worry. You're not exactly, that is, you're a larger woman. That can complicate things. Evelyn felt the familiar burn of humiliation. All her life, people had commented on her size. Too heavy, too big, not delicate enough. Vincent's mother had once said she looked like a farm horse next to the other society women. The doctor says I'm healthy, Evelyn said evenly. Oh, doctors! Margaret waved a dismissive hand. What do they know? I've birthed 3 children myself, and let me tell you, it's the small, delicate women who have the easiest time of it. Women built like you. She paused, as if choosing her words carefully. Well, let's just say nature didn't design you for this. Something inside Evelyn snapped. Get off my property, she said. Margaret blinked. Excuse me? You heard me. Get off my property and don't come back. Well, I never... You come here every time with your pity and your comparisons and your thinly veiled insults, and I'm done with it. Evelyn's voice was shaking but firm. Sarah was a wonderful woman, I'm sure, but she's gone, and I'm here, and if you can't accept that, then you're not welcome. Margaret's face turned red. How dare you speak to me that way? I'm only trying to help. By telling me I'm too fat to give birth safely, that's helping. I didn't say fat. You didn't have to. Evelyn stepped closer. I've spent my whole life listening to women like you tell me what's wrong with me, my body, my worth, and I'm done. So leave, now. Margaret sputtered for a moment, then turned on her heel and climbed back into her wagon. Caleb will hear about this, she said coldly. Good, tell him. Margaret drove off in a cloud of dust and indignation. Evelyn stood there, shaking, her heart pounding. Then she sat down hard on the porch steps and burst into tears. That was where Caleb found her an hour later. He dismounted and crouched in front of her. What happened? She told him, the words tumbling out between sobs, about Margaret, about the insults, about the years of being told she was too much, too big, too wrong. When she finished, Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Margaret Hastings is a bitter old woman who never got over the fact that Sarah didn't need her as much as she wanted to be needed. Evelyn looked up, surprised. Sarah was kind to her, Caleb continued, but they weren't really friends. Margaret just liked feeling important. He reached out and brushed a tear from Evelyn's cheek. And for what it's worth, I don't think you're too big. I think you're strong, and I'm glad you're strong because you're going to need that strength. It was the kindest thing he'd ever said to her. She grabbed his hand and held it against her face, and for a moment they just stayed like that, connected in the fading afternoon light. Then he pulled her to her feet. Come on, you need to rest. I'm tired of resting. Too bad. He led her inside, settled her on the bed behind the curtain, and brought her a cup of tea. Then he sat in the chair beside the bed and picked up the shirt he'd been mending. You're going to sit there? Evelyn asked. Yep. That's not necessary. I know. She smiled despite herself and closed her eyes. When she woke up 2 hours later, he was still there, stitching quietly in the dimming light. By December, winter had arrived in earnest. Snow fell in thick, heavy flakes, blanketing the ranch in white. The cattle huddled together for warmth. The chickens stopped laying. The work became harder, colder, more brutal, and Evelyn grew rounder. And she was 5 months along now, her belly unmistakable. She moved slower, tired more easily, her back aching constantly, but she refused to stay in bed all day. She cooked, mended, helped Sadie with the washing when Caleb wasn't watching. One morning she was kneading bread dough when she felt it, a flutter like a fish turning in deep water. She froze, her hand still in the dough. It happened again, stronger this time. Oh, she breathed. Sadie looked up from the table where she was doing schoolwork. What's wrong? Nothing, the baby moved. Sadie's eyes went wide. Really? Yeah. The girl scrambled over, her homework forgotten. Can I feel? Evelyn hesitated, then nodded. Sadie pressed her small hand against Evelyn's belly and waited. The baby kicked. Sadie gasped. I felt it. It's real. It's real, Evelyn said, laughing. James came running in from outside, his nose red from the cold. "What's real?" "The baby kicked," Sadie said, her face glowing. "Can I feel?" James asked. Evelyn guided his hand to the right spot. The baby obliged with another kick. James's face lit up. "It's strong." "It is," Evelyn agreed. Caleb came in a moment later, stamping snow off his boots. He stopped when he saw them all clustered around Evelyn, hands on her belly. "Baby's kicking," James announced proudly. Caleb's expression softened. He walked over slowly, like he was approaching something fragile. "You want to feel?" Evelyn asked quietly. He nodded, his throat working. She took his hand and placed it where the others had been. For a moment nothing happened. Then the baby kicked hard right against his palm. Caleb's breath hitched. That's your baby," Evelyn said. He looked at her, his eyes bright with something she couldn't name. Then he leaned down and pressed his forehead against hers. "Our baby," he said. It was the first time he'd claimed it as his own. The happiness lasted exactly 3 days. On the third night, Evelyn woke to the sound of horses outside. She sat up, groggy and confused. Beside her, Caleb was already on his feet, pulling on his boots. "Stay here," he said. "What's wrong?" "I don't know." He grabbed the rifle from the corner and went outside. Evelyn got up despite his order, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. Through the window, she saw 2 horses in the yard, 2 men climbing down. One of them was Vincent. Her blood turned to ice. She recognized him instantly. The sharp nose, the thin mouth, the way he moved with cold precision. He was older than she remembered, grayer, but it was definitely him. The other man was a stranger, older, heavy-set, carrying a leather satchel. Evelyn's hands started to shake. Outside, Caleb's voice carried through the cold night air. "What do you want?" Vincent's reply was calm, almost pleasant. "I'm looking for my wife." "Your wife is in Millbrook, I'm guessing. This is my wife." "Actually," Vincent said, "that's a legal matter we need to discuss." Evelyn couldn't breathe. She gripped the windowsill, her vision swimming. Sadie appeared at her elbow, eyes wide with fear. "Who is that?" "Go back to bed," Evelyn said. "But now, Sadie." The girl hesitated, then obeyed. Evelyn forced herself to move. She pulled on her coat, shoved her feet into her boots, and stepped outside. Vincent saw her and smiled. It was the same smile he'd given her on their wedding day. Cold, calculating, utterly devoid of warmth. "Hello, Evelyn." "What are you doing here?" Her voice came out stronger than she felt. "I've come to bring you home." "I am home." "Actually, you're not." He gestured to the man beside him. "This is Mr. Whitman. He's a lawyer. He has some interesting documents to show you." Caleb moved to stand beside Evelyn, his rifle still in hand. "I don't care what your documents say. She's not going anywhere." "That's not your decision to make," Vincent said smoothly. "You see, Evelyn and I are still legally married." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "That's not true. The divorce was never finalized." Vincent pulled a paper from his coat and held it up. The clerk made an error, filed the paperwork incorrectly. "According to the law, we're still husband and wife." "That's impossible," Evelyn said. "It's right here in black and white." He looked at her belly, his eyes narrowing. "And that means the child you're carrying is legally mine." The world tilted. Caleb's grip on the rifle tightened. "Get off my land." "I'm not here to cause trouble," Vincent said. "I'm here to retrieve what's mine. My wife. My child." "She's not your wife," Caleb said, his voice deadly quiet. "And that's sure as hell not your child. Legally, they're both mine." Vincent's smile widened. "Unless you want to challenge me in court, which I assure you you'll lose." "Why?" Evelyn found her voice. "Why are you doing this?" Vincent's mask slipped slightly. She saw the anger underneath, the humiliation. "Because the truth came out, Evelyn. After you left, I remarried. My new wife got pregnant within 3 months." He spat the words. "The entire town knows now that the problem was never you. It was me." Understanding crashed over her. He'd blamed her for years, built his reputation on the lie that she was barren, and now everyone knew he was the one who was broken. "So you're here for revenge," she said. "I'm here to reclaim what's mine. You, the child, everything. His eyes were cold. You humiliated me. Now you'll come back and play the dutiful wife while I rebuild my reputation. I'd rather die. That can be arranged. His tone was pleasant, but the threat was clear. Caleb raised the rifle. Leave now. Shoot me if you want, Vincent said, but that won't change the law. The marriage is valid, and I'll be back with the sheriff to enforce it. He climbed back onto his horse. Mr. Whitman followed, looking uncomfortable. You have 3 days to come to your senses, Vincent called. After that, I'll take you by force if necessary. They rode off into the darkness. Evelyn stood there, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Caleb lowered the rifle and turned to her. Is it true? He asked. About the divorce? I don't know. It should have been. The lawyer said. She couldn't finish. Caleb pulled her against him, the rifle hanging loose in his other hand. She clung to him, her mind racing. If Vincent was right, everything was a lie. Her marriage to Caleb, her place here, her future. And the baby, her baby, would belong to a man who'd spent 5 years destroying her. We'll fight this, Caleb said. How? You heard him? The law? Damn the law. His voice was fierce. You're mine. That baby is mine. And I'm not letting him take you. He'll come back with the sheriff. Let him. Caleb pulled back, his hands on her shoulders. There's got to be a way. The original divorce papers, where were they filed? County courthouse, 3 counties east. Then that's where I'm going. He looked toward the barn. I'll leave at first light. Find the original records. Prove the divorce went through. What if it didn't? Then we'll figure something else out. His jaw was set. But I'm not giving up. Not on you, not on this. Inside the cabin, Sadie was standing by the window, her face white. Is she leaving? She asked when they came in. No, Caleb said firmly. But that man said, I don't care what he said. Evelyn's not going anywhere. Sadie looked at Evelyn, her eyes brimming with tears. Promise? Evelyn wanted to promise. Wanted to tell this child that everything would be fine, that she'd never leave, that they'd always be a family. But she couldn't lie. I'm going to fight, she said instead, as hard as I can. It wasn't the promise Sadie wanted, but it was the only one Evelyn could give. That night, Caleb packed supplies for the journey. 3 days ride to the county seat. 3 days back. Maybe longer if the weather turned bad or the records were hard to find. Evelyn watched him work, her heart in her throat. What if he comes back while you're gone? She asked. Peter will stay here, and I'm leaving you this. He pulled a revolver from his saddlebag and set it on the table. You know how to use it? No. He showed her how to load it, aim it, fire it. His hands were steady, but his voice was tight with fear. If Vincent shows up, you shoot him, he said. Caleb, I mean it. You shoot him. You don't talk, you don't negotiate, you just shoot. She nodded, her hands trembling as she held the gun. When dawn came, Caleb saddled his horse. The children were still asleep. Evelyn stood in the yard, wrapped in her coat, watching him prepare to leave. Be careful, she said. I will. If you can't find the records, I'll find them. He swung up into the saddle, then looked down at her. Evelyn, listen to me. Whatever happens, you're my wife. Not his, mine. And I'm coming back for you. She nodded, unable to speak. He rode off into the grey morning, and Evelyn stood there until he disappeared over the ridge. Then she went inside, checked the revolver, and prayed that 3 days would be enough. The first day without Caleb crawled by like a wounded animal. Evelyn kept the revolver in her apron pocket, the weight of it a constant reminder of what might be coming. She made breakfast with shaking hands, drove the children to school, came back to an empty cabin that felt more like a trap than a home. Peter, the hired boy, stayed close to the house, working on repairs that didn't need doing. He was 17 and gangly, barely old enough to shave, but he carried a shotgun and checked the road every hour. Ain't nobody getting past me, ma'am, he said, with more confidence than his trembling hands suggested. Evelyn nodded and didn't tell him that Vincent wouldn't need to get past him. Vincent would bring the law, and the law didn't care about shotguns or determination or what was right. The law only cared about paperwork. That night, Sadie refused to go to bed. "What if he comes?" she asked, sitting at the table long after James had fallen asleep. "Then we'll deal with it." "How?" Evelyn didn't have an answer. She just pulled the girl close and held her until exhaustion won and Sadie's head dropped against her shoulder. She carried her to bed, awkward now with her pregnant belly in the way, and tucked her in beside James. Then she sat in Caleb's chair by the cold fireplace, the revolver in her lap, and watched the darkness outside the window. She must have dozed off because the sound of horses jerked her awake. Dawn was just breaking, the sky grey and uncertain. Through the window she saw them, 4 riders this time. Vincent in front, the lawyer beside him, and 2 men she didn't recognize wearing badges. Her heart stopped. She stood, checked the revolver, and stepped outside before they could reach the door. Peter appeared from the barn, shotgun raised, his face pale. "Mrs. Boone?" one of the deputies called. He was older, with a thick moustache and weary eyes. "I'm Deputy Marshal Hendricks. This is Deputy Clay. We need to speak with you." "About what?" Evelyn's voice was steadier than she felt. Vincent smiled that cold smile. "About coming home, dear wife." "I am home." "Actually," the lawyer stepped forward, papers in hand. "Mrs. Mercer, I have here documentation proving that your divorce from Mr. Mercer was never legally finalized, which means your subsequent marriage to Mr. Boone is invalid." "That's a lie. It's a matter of public record." He held out the papers. The clerk failed to file the final decree, an unfortunate oversight, but legally binding nonetheless. Hendricks looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I've reviewed the documents. They appear legitimate." "Then the original records will prove otherwise. My husband went to get them." "Where is Mr. Boone?" Hendricks asked. 3 days east. He'll be back in 6 days at the earliest," Vincent interrupted smoothly, "which gives us plenty of time to resolve this matter." "There's nothing to resolve. I'm not going with you." Vincent's expression hardened. "You don't have a choice. The law says you're my wife. The child you're carrying is mine, and these deputies are here to enforce that law. I'd rather die than go back to you. We can arrange that too." His voice dropped, losing its veneer of civility. "Or you can come quietly and spare everyone the unpleasantness." Peter raised the shotgun higher. She said no. Vincent barely glanced at him. "Boy, put that down before you hurt yourself." "I ain't putting down nothing." Deputy Clay moved his hand to his sidearm. "Son, lower the weapon. Nobody needs to get shot today." "He's right," Evelyn said quietly to Peter. "Put it down." "But Mom." "Put it down." Peter lowered the shotgun, his jaw clenched with impotent rage. Hendricks stepped forward. "Mrs. Mercer or Mrs. Boone, depending on how this shakes out. I don't want any trouble, but the law is the law. Until we see proof that the divorce was finalized, Mr. Mercer has a legal claim." "What about what I want?" Evelyn's voice cracked. "Don't I get a say?" "Not in matters of legal marriage, Mom. I'm sorry." Vincent dismounted. "Pack your things. We're leaving within the hour." "No." He stepped closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You can walk out that door with dignity, or I can have these men drag you out. Either way, you're coming. And if you fight me, I'll make sure that child is taken from you the moment it's born." Evelyn felt the baby kick, as if it could sense her terror. The cabin door opened. Sadie stood there in her nightgown, her face white. "Don't take her." Vincent looked at the girl with barely concealed disgust. "This doesn't concern you, child." "Yes, it does. She's my mother." "She's not your mother. Your mother is dead." The words hit like a slap. Sadie flinched and Evelyn saw her face crumble. "Don't talk to her like that," Evelyn said, her voice shaking with rage. "I'll talk however I please." Vincent turned back to Hendricks. "Are we doing this peacefully or not?" Hendricks sighed. "Ma'am, please, make this easier on everyone." Evelyn looked at Sadie standing in the doorway, at Peter with his useless shotgun, at the empty road where Caleb wouldn't appear for days. She had no leverage, no proof, no way to fight. "I need to pack," she said finally. Vincent smiled. "You have 10 minutes." She walked into the cabin on numb legs. Sadie followed, tears streaming down her face. "You can't go," the girl whispered. "I don't have a choice. Pa will come back." Not in time. Evelyn pulled out her suitcase, the same one she'd arrived with, and started folding clothes with shaking hands. "Sadie, listen to me. When your father gets back, tell him," her voice broke. "Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him to take care of you and James. Tell him—" "No." Sadie grabbed her arm. You promised you wouldn't leave." "I'm not leaving. I'm being taken." "It's the same thing." James appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "What's happening?" Sadie turned to him, her face fierce through her tears. "That bad man is trying to take Evelyn away." James's eyes went wide. "Why?" "Because he's mean and awful and—" Sadie's voice broke into sobs. Evelyn knelt down, awkward with her belly, and pulled both children close. "I love you both. Remember that. No matter what happens, I love you." "Don't go," James said, his small voice muffled against her shoulder. She held them until Vincent shouted from outside, "Time's up!" She stood, picked up her suitcase, and walked to the door. That's when she heard the horses, multiple horses, coming fast. Everyone turned toward the sound. Through the morning mist, riders appeared, 6, 7, maybe more. As they got closer, Evelyn recognized faces from town, shopkeepers, farmers, and in front, riding a grey mare, was Margaret Hastings. Vincent frowned. "What is this?" Margaret dismounted with surprising grace for her age. Behind her, Clara climbed down, along with Miss Coulter, the schoolteacher, Dr. Brennan, and a half-dozen men Evelyn vaguely recognized from town. "What's going on here, Hendricks?" Margaret demanded. The deputy looked confused. "Official business, Mrs. Hastings. Best you stay out of it." "Official business?" Margaret's eyebrows shot up. "Abducting a pregnant woman seems more like criminal activity to me." "She's not being abducted. She's being returned to her lawful husband." "Her husband is Caleb Boone," Margaret said firmly. Vincent stepped forward. "Actually, the law disagrees." Margaret turned to him with a look of pure contempt. "And who are you?" "Vincent Mercer, Evelyn's legal husband." "Her former husband, you mean? The divorce was never finalized." "How convenient for you." Margaret's voice dripped with sarcasm. She pulled a paper from her bag. "I took the liberty of contacting the county clerk's office yesterday after hearing about your little visit. This is a telegram confirming that the divorce decree was filed properly and is legally binding." Vincent's face went white. "That's impossible." "It's right here." She handed the paper to Hendricks. "Signed and dated. The divorce is valid, which means this woman is Mrs. Boone, not Mrs. Mercer, and you have no legal claim to her or her child." The lawyer grabbed the telegram, read it, and went pale. "This can't be. We checked the records." "You checked the wrong county," Margaret said coldly. "The divorce was filed in Evelyn's home county, not yours. A fact you would have known if you'd bothered to do proper research instead of trying to terrorize a pregnant woman." Vincent's face twisted with rage. "You're lying." "I don't lie, Mr. Mercer." Margaret's voice was steel. "Unlike you, apparently." Hendricks was reading the telegram, his expression shifting from confusion to anger. He looked at Vincent. "Is this true? Did you know the divorce was filed in a different county?" We must have made an error." "An error." Hendricks's voice was flat. "You dragged me out here, made me threaten a pregnant woman on the basis of an error." The lawyer said— "I don't care what the lawyer said." Hendricks turned to Evelyn. "Ma'am, I apologize. You're free to stay. This man has no claim on you." Vincent lunged forward. "She's my wife." Deputy Clay caught him by the arm. "No, sir, she's not. And if you don't leave peacefully, I'll arrest you for harassment." "You can't." "I can, and I will." Clay's hand moved to his pistol. "Now mount up and get out of here before I change my mind about being civil." Vincent stared at Evelyn, his face contorted with impotent fury. "This isn't over." "Yes," Margaret said quietly, "it is." She stepped forward, and suddenly every person who'd ridden with her moved with her, a wall of bodies between Vincent and Evelyn. The shopkeepers, the farmers, Dr. Brennan with his medical bag, Miss Coulter with her schoolteacher's stern expression. Even Clara, who'd been so cold before, stood with her arms crossed. Vincent looked at them, at the deputies who were no longer on his side, at his lawyer who was already backing towards the horses. "You'll regret this," he said to Evelyn. "No," she said quietly, "I really won't." He mounted his horse and rode off, the lawyer scrambling after him. Deputy Clay followed to make sure they kept going. Hendricks tipped his hat to Evelyn. "Again, Mom, my apologies. We were given false information. It's not your fault." He rode off, leaving Evelyn standing in the yard, surrounded by townspeople who'd come to her defense. Margaret stepped forward. "Are you all right?" Evelyn stared at her. "Why did you help me?" "Because I was wrong about you." Margaret's voice was softer than Evelyn had ever heard it. "I spent so long comparing you to Sarah that I couldn't see who you actually were. But Sadie helped me understand." "Sadie?" "She came to town 2 days ago, walked the whole way by herself, showed up at my door and told me exactly what kind of person you are." Margaret's eyes were bright. "She said you weren't trying to replace her mother. You were just trying to be yourself, and that was enough." Evelyn looked at Sadie, who was standing in the doorway with tears streaming down her face. "I was scared you'd leave," Sadie said, "so I went to get help. I thought if enough people knew you were good, maybe they'd make him go away." Evelyn dropped her suitcase and walked to the girl, pulling her into a tight embrace. "You did that for me? You're my mama now," Sadie said into her shoulder. "I wasn't going to let him take you." The other townspeople started to disperse, murmuring about chores and work, but Dr. Brennan lingered. "Let me check on you before I go," he said. "Make sure all this excitement didn't cause any problems." He examined her in the cabin while Margaret made tea, an absurd sight that made Evelyn want to laugh and cry at the same time. "Baby's fine," Dr. Brennan announced. "Strong heartbeat. You're healthy, though you should probably avoid any more dramatic confrontations for the next few months." "I'll try." Margaret brought her the tea. "I owe you an apology. Several, actually." "You already apologized by saving me." "That was just correcting a wrong. This is—" Margaret sat down heavily. "I loved Sarah. She was like a daughter to me. When she died, I thought the best way to honor her was to keep everything exactly as she'd left it, to make sure no one forgot her." "That's not wrong," Evelyn said quietly. "It is when it means I couldn't let her family move forward." Margaret's hands were shaking slightly around her teacup. "Sadie told me that you never tried to make them forget Sarah. You just tried to give them permission to be happy again. That took more strength than I gave you credit for." Evelyn's throat was tight. "I'm still not her." "No, you're not." Margaret met her eyes. "You're yourself. And that's exactly what this family needs." After everyone left, Evelyn sat on the porch with the children. James was drawing pictures of horses in the dirt. Sadie sat close, her head on Evelyn's shoulder. "How did you know where to find the divorce records?" Evelyn asked. "I didn't. I just told Mrs. Hastings everything I knew and asked her to check." Sadie's voice was small. "I was so scared she'd say no, but she didn't." "No, she looked at me for a long time. Then she said, 'Your mama would be proud of you.' And she started writing telegrams." Evelyn kissed the top of Sadie's head. "I'm proud of you too." They sat in silence, watching the sun climb higher. Peter had gone back to his work, whistling with relief. The chickens pecked in the yard. Everything looked normal, like the last hour had been a nightmare instead of reality. But Evelyn's hands were still shaking. Caleb returned 4 days later, riding hard, his face haggard with exhaustion. He'd pushed straight through without sleeping, terrified of what he'd find. He dismounted in the yard and Evelyn ran out to meet him, as much as a woman 6 months pregnant could run. "What happened?" he demanded, gripping her shoulders. "Are you all right? Did he—" "I'm fine, we're fine." "He came back, didn't he? I knew I shouldn't have left. Caleb, stop." She pressed her hands to his chest. He came. He tried to take me, but the town stopped him. She told him everything about Vincent's claims, the false documents, Margaret's arrival with proof, the wall of neighbors who'd stood between her and her past. When she finished, Caleb pulled her against him so hard she gasped. "I should have been here," he said roughly. "You couldn't have known. I should have killed him when I had the chance. Then you'd be in jail and I'd be alone." She pulled back to look at him. "It worked out. We're safe. The divorce is valid. Vincent is gone." "What if he comes back?" "He won't." She said it with more confidence than she felt, but she needed to believe it. "He's humiliated. Everyone knows the truth now. He won't risk showing his face here again." Caleb searched her eyes, then nodded slowly. He kept his arms around her like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. That night, after the children were asleep, they lay in bed together in the dark. Caleb's hand rested on her belly, feeling the baby kick. "I was halfway to the county seat when I realized something," he said quietly. "What?" "That I love you." Evelyn went still. "I know I never said it before," he continued. "I didn't think I could. After Sarah, I thought that part of me was just dead. But when I was riding away from you, all I could think about was getting back, and not because of duty or obligation or because the kids need you." His hand tightened slightly on her stomach. "Because I need you." Evelyn felt tears sliding down her temples into her hair. "You don't have to say that." "I'm not saying it because I have to. I'm saying it because it's true." He propped himself up on one elbow, his face shadowed in the darkness. "You came here expecting nothing, asking for nothing, and somehow you gave us everything." "I gave you a broken woman who can't bake bread," she said, trying to make a joke of it. "You gave us a mother, a wife, someone who fights." His voice was rough. "Someone who stays." She reached up and touched his face. "I love you too. I have for weeks. I just didn't think you wanted to hear it. I want to hear it every day for the rest of my life." He kissed her then, gentle and careful, like she was something precious. And for the first time since she'd left Millbrook, Evelyn felt completely certain that she was exactly where she belonged. Winter deepened. The snow piled higher. But inside the cabin something had shifted. There was laughter now, warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. Caleb still worked from dawn to dusk, but he came inside for lunch. He'd sit with Evelyn while she mended or rested, just talking about small things, the cattle, the weather, his plans for spring planting. Sadie stopped trying to do everything herself. She let Evelyn help with the cooking, the cleaning, the endless work of keeping a household running. And sometimes, in the evenings, she'd curl up next to Evelyn and ask to hear stories about when Evelyn was young. James decided the baby was his responsibility. He talked to Evelyn's belly, telling it about his day at school, the frog he'd found, the story Miss Coulter had read. The baby seemed to respond to his voice, kicking whenever he got close. By February, Evelyn was huge and uncomfortable. Her back ached constantly. Her feet were swollen. She couldn't sleep lying down anymore, so she spent nights propped up on pillows, dozing fitfully while Caleb snored beside her. One morning in early March, she woke to a strange sensation, a tightening across her belly that took her breath away. She lay still, waiting. It happened again, stronger this time. "Caleb," she said. He was instantly awake. "What's wrong?" I think it's time." His face went white. "It's too early. You have another month? Tell that to the baby." He was out of bed and pulling on his boots before she could blink. "I'll get Dr. Brennan." "Caleb, wait." But he was already gone, running for the barn. Sadie appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "What's happening?" "The baby's coming." The girl's face lit up with excitement and terror. "Now?" "Probably not for a while, but yes." Evelyn gripped the edge of the bed as another contraction hit. "Can you wake your brother and get some water boiling?" Sadie nodded and ran off. The next hours were a blur of pain and fear. Dr. Brennan arrived and took over with calm efficiency. Margaret showed up uninvited and started organizing everything, sending Peter to fetch clean towels, boiling water, keeping the children occupied. Caleb refused to leave. He held Evelyn's hand through every contraction, his face pale and terrified. "You're doing fine," he kept saying. "You're strong. You're going to be fine." Evelyn wanted to believe him, but as the contractions got stronger and closer together, as the pain became unbearable, she understood why he was so scared. This was how Sarah had died. "Caleb," she gasped between contractions, "if something happens, nothing's going to happen. But if it does, promise me you'll take care of—" "Stop," his voice broke. "Don't talk like that. You're not leaving me. I won't let you." Dr. Brennan looked up from his position at the foot of the bed. "She's fully dilated. Time to push." What followed was pain beyond anything Evelyn had imagined. She pushed until she thought she'd split apart, screamed until her throat was raw, gripped Caleb's hand so hard she thought she'd break his fingers. And then, suddenly, there was a different sound. A baby crying. "It's a girl," Dr. Brennan announced. "A healthy baby girl." Evelyn collapsed back against the pillow, sobbing with relief. Caleb was crying too, his forehead pressed against hers. Dr. Brennan cleaned the baby and wrapped her in a blanket, then placed her in Evelyn's arms. She was perfect, tiny and red and squalling with indignation. She had a shock of dark hair and eyes that were still unfocused, but trying to see everything at once. "Hello, little one," Evelyn whispered. The baby stopped crying and stared at her. Caleb reached out with a shaking hand and touched the baby's cheek. "She's beautiful." "She's ours," Evelyn said. He kissed her temple. "She's ours." Margaret appeared in the doorway with Sadie and James. The children crept forward, wide-eyed. "Is that the baby?" James asked. "That's your sister," Evelyn said. Sadie sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the tiny bundle. "She's so small. You were that small once." "Really?" "Really." Evelyn adjusted the blanket so they could see the baby's face better. "What should we name her?" Sadie looked at Caleb. "Can we name her after Mama?" Caleb's throat worked. "You want to?" "I think Mama would like it. Knowing someone else gets to use her name." Sadie touched the baby's hand. "And she can have a piece of Mama too." Evelyn felt tears spill over. "Sarah, we'll call her Sarah." The baby made a small, snuffling sound. James laughed. "She likes it," he declared. Dr. Brennan finished his examination. "Mother and baby are both healthy. You did well, Mrs. Boone." "Thank you." After he left, after Margaret had cleaned up and departed with promises to check on them tomorrow, after the children had been sent reluctantly to bed, Caleb and Evelyn lay together with the baby between them. "I was so scared," Caleb admitted. "The whole time, all I could think about was Sarah and all the blood and—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "I'm not Sarah," Evelyn said gently. "I'm me, and I'm still here." He looked at her, his eyes bright. "I know, and I'm grateful every single day that you are." The baby squirmed, and Evelyn adjusted her carefully. "Do you ever regret it, bringing me here?" "Not once. Not even when I burned the biscuits?" "Not even then." He traced a finger down the baby's cheek. "You gave me my life back. You gave the kids a mother. You gave me—" He paused. "You gave me a reason to be more than just someone who survives." Evelyn leaned against him, exhausted and happy and overwhelmed. "I never thought I'd have this. This? A family. People who chose me. A place where I belong." She looked down at the baby. "For so long, everyone told me I was broken, useless, and I believed them." "You're not broken." "I know that now." She smiled. "It just took coming to the middle of nowhere and almost losing everything to figure it out." Caleb kissed her forehead. "You didn't lose anything. You gained everything." Spring came slowly that year, but it came. The snow melted, the grass turned green, the cattle fattened, and inside the cabin, life settled into a new rhythm. Sarah, baby Sarah, turned out to have lungs like a steam engine. She cried when she was hungry, when she was tired, when she was wet, and sometimes just because. But she also smiled early, big toothless grins that made everyone stop whatever they were doing to smile back. James appointed himself her protector. He'd sit by her cradle and tell her stories, his small voice serious and important. Sadie learned to change diapers, warm bottles, rock the baby to sleep. She was a natural, patient, and gentle in a way that made Evelyn's chest ache with pride. And Caleb transformed. He'd hold the baby for hours, walking the floor when she was fussy, singing her wordless songs in his rough voice. Sometimes Evelyn would wake in the night to find him standing over the cradle, just watching Sarah sleep. One evening in May, they all sat on the porch together. Evelyn was nursing the baby while Caleb and James fixed a broken fence rail. Sadie was shelling peas, humming to herself. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The land stretched out before them, vast and beautiful and harsh. "It's pretty," James said, looking at the sunset. "It is," Evelyn agreed. Sadie looked up from her peas. "Do you like it here now?" "I love it here, even though it's hard sometimes." "Especially because it's hard sometimes." Evelyn shifted the baby to her other side. "The things worth having are usually hard." Caleb walked over and sat down beside her. He didn't say anything, just put his arm around her shoulders. They sat like that as the sun sank lower, a family gathered together at the end of a long day. Evelyn thought about the woman she'd been a year ago. Broken, discarded, convinced she had nothing to offer. She thought about the train ride west, the terror of meeting Caleb, the long months of fighting for her place in this family. And she realized something. She hadn't been barren. She'd just been planted in the wrong soil. Vincent had been rocky ground, hard and unforgiving, where nothing could take root. But here, in this brutal wilderness, surrounded by people who'd chosen her despite her flaws, she'd finally been able to grow. Not into something perfect, not into someone without scars or doubts or bad days, but into herself, fully and completely herself. The baby finished nursing and let out a small, satisfied sigh. Evelyn lifted her to her shoulder and patted her back gently. "What are you thinking about?" Caleb asked quietly. "How lucky I am." He smiled. "I'm the lucky one." "We're all lucky," Sadie said, not looking up from her peas. James nodded seriously. "Yep, we got a whole family now." And that was it, Evelyn thought, the simple truth that had taken her a lifetime to understand. Family wasn't about blood or birth or being perfect. It was about choosing each other, day after day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. It was about making space for people to be broken and scared and imperfect and loving them anyway. It was about planting yourself somewhere and refusing to be uprooted no matter how many storms came. The baby let out a little burp and everyone laughed. Caleb kissed Evelyn's temple. "I love you. I love you too." The sun sank below the horizon, and the stars began to appear one by one in the darkening sky. And Evelyn Boone, no longer Mercer, never again the woman they'd called useless, sat on the porch of her home, surrounded by her family, and felt completely at peace. She'd been told she couldn't have children. She'd been told she wasn't worth loving. She'd been told she would never be enough. But here in the wild frontier, she'd learned the truth. She was exactly enough. She always had been. She just needed to find people who could see it. And now that she had, she was never letting them go.